um, and here we go. So thank you all for those comments. That helps me. So this is a big agenda. I'm going to go through many things. This is being recorded, as you just heard. So um, I think the rule of thumb is don't take notes, absorb what you can, and then come back should you want it. But basically, the core skill sets, you need to know levels of measurement, okay? You need to know, and it does happen, whether a 4-point or 7-point Likert is an ordinal or a scale. How do I select the test? That's important. Setting up data, talk about that. Create your account. That's already in the webinar chat. Data cleaning wizard, that comes from folks like you all, or from that faculty member who said to me, Jim, what are you doing to help with data management? Based on that comment, we created a data cleaning wizard to support that, because anyone who has done any kind of quantitative analysis, and for all of those of you that are starting this, data management is 90% of the job. You say, well, I'm just kind of creating variables, and yeah, it's 90% of the job. So the data cleaning wizard helps with that. A quick comment about clinical versus statistical significance. This is just more for your edification that, really what we look at and what we report is around the statistical significance, that 0.05, okay, that came down from the heavens. But I should find out exactly how that came about, actually. Why not 0.04? Why not 0.07? But statistical significance is what folks typically report and what journals want. But there's also this clinical significance business. And it's just that, particularly in DNP projects, oftentimes the samples are really small, so it may not reach, and it's sample size dependent with regard to statistical significance, but sometimes the effect size or the clinical significance is there, okay? And is so don't be disheartened should you not have the statistical significance. If you're saving a life or having less falls or less infections, that's all to the very, very good, and certainly important for those folks. We'll do some tests, show you the discussion draft, show you how to download this stuff, and take Q&A. But you just throw Q&A at me the whole time, okay? No problem. Okay. Also, I'll just mention my colleagues, Melissa, Samantha, and Ashley are on the line. Samantha can help all students get organized to meet with me should you want to do that. Ashley is here to support the faculty members with things like quantitative trials, qualitative trials, coursework, things of that sort, courseware rather, courseware for coursework. All right. So let's just go through some of the basics. Yes, you have to memorize this. You have to know this, okay? There's only 3 ways of chopping up quantitative data. One of them is in label form, male, female, Republican, Democrat, Independent. There's no order. There's no hierarchy. They're just, this is a green block. This is a red block. This is a blue block, okay? So just nominal levels of measurement, okay? They're only labels. A lot of data is like that, okay? Particularly if we're splitting things up by gender or things of the sort. Okay, ordinal, less frequent, but happens. These have labels, small, medium, guzzle size or whatever the 64 ounces, okay? So there's labels, small is a label, medium is a label, and then there's an order to those labels. And it has that icon, okay, of that bar chart. So those icons are going to come into play. And then scale, okay, has all 3, okay? So it has 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch. It has a label, 1 inch, okay? It has an order, 2 comes after 1, okay? Right? And equal spacing or equal size or equal volume, okay? So that's the idea of this equal. Why does this matter at all? Well, the particular tests only allow certain levels of measurement, okay? A paired t-test only allows a scale level variable there, okay? A chi-square only allows nominal and ordinal variables there. So that's why those 3 levels are really important to know. In those levels, okay, so there's really, I need to really have 3 cases here. Okay, so sometimes in the for a particular item, okay, there's only 3 or 4 points. None, a little, a lot, extremely some darn thing. And sometimes you're just comparing that item before some intervention and some item post some intervention, okay? When that is the case, that you're comparing just that one item, okay, and it has 3 or 4 points, okay, you can keep the rule of thumb is to keep that as the ordinal, as an ordinal level of measurement. However, once you move into a 5 or 7 point Likert type scale, I believe the correct pronunciation is Likert type scale, but people say a Likert type scale. When you get into the 5, I should probably use the correct pronunciation. When you get into the 5 or 7 point Likert type scales, okay, then it's okay to consider those as scale levels of measurement and use the appropriate tests for those ordinal or scale level items. The one addition to that is really once you start adding these things, adding multiple 3 to 4 point items, okay, adding or averaging, okay, these items or questions. Once you start doing that, you are now in scale land, okay? So my example is that when you take a 10-point test, and by the way, a lot of these things are just kind of tests, okay? And you can get a correct or incorrect answer. That's nominal, correct or incorrect. But once I start adding up those 10 questions on that test, I get 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. That's a scale level measurement. So these are just for the single items. How do we treat those? Okay, how do we treat those questions? And then once we add those or average those, how do we treat those? Most of the people get stuck on data analysis plan, okay? I mean, this is really, my bread and butter, okay? It's just you don't have enough experience with it typically, and it's been kind of, there's several things to know about data analysis plans. Basically, the only thing we're saying, or the only question we're asking is, what statistical test should I use? That's the question, okay? And when you decide upon that, and I'll show you how to decide upon that, when you decide upon that, you should state 3 things, okay? You should state, this is the test, okay? This is the assumptions of the test, and this is the justification of the test. And for 80% of you that are doing some paired sample t-test, okay, some pre to post test difference, some pre-test, some intervention, some post-test, it's really, I'm doing a paired sample t-test, okay? The assumption is just normality, okay? There's assumptions to the tests. And a justification is that a paired sample t-test is appropriate when you are looking at a scale level variable from pre to post, okay? All right. So data analysis plan. Also, that's really important because the sample size is going to be based on that. And I need to kind of touch on that for a second. So the data analysis plan is really, there's 2 parts of that puzzle. The one is, am I using statistical language? And it's not any fancy language. It's just like differences or, relationships or things of that sort. So that kind of language that kind of leads one to a particular kind of test. Does A, predict B? Okay, I'm in regression land. So that language very, very often kind of helps us understand what test. The other part is the levels of measurement. Does some variable, predict live or die? It's a dichotomous nominal outcome variable. Okay, I'm doing a binary logistic regression. Does my independent variable predict some confidence score? Okay, all right. So the scale level measurements. I'm doing a linear regression or a linear multiple regression. So those are two parts of the pie that you need. Okay. We have something in the tool to help with that, but um, my guess is if you throw that into an LLM of some sort, that's going to help you, okay? Um, uh, Determine that statistical test. Okay, PICO question. So DNPs and PhD nurses, um, often use a PICO question, and it's really it's a very inclusive, comprehensive question which talks about the patients and who am I comparing and what's the time period and so forth. Okay, and that's not going to go away, and it's useful to have some one statement, okay, that includes all of those. However, when you want to get to that darn data plan, okay, I call it a Pico light. Just tell me the variables and tell me the relationship. I want to compare knowledge pre to post. That gets me to the test. I want to see if there's differences on, 5K runtime by age group. Okay. Variables and the relationship between those variables. Okay. That's the Pico light. So everyone's going to continue to do the PICO questions, no problem. But just know when it comes to the data plan, you really want a PICO light orientation, okay? All right. Variables and relationships between them or among them. This is kind of well, these are the statistical language part, differences, okay, relationships, okay, is some prediction between them. So in other words, we have to connect those variables in some fashion, and that language is important. Setting up your data is also important, okay? So most folks that are doing paired sample t-test, we're in this box to the left here, okay? Which is to say that that each individual participant or ID variable here, each participant is on a row. If you have demographics for participant one, goes on that row. If you have the 10 items at knowledge at pretest, goes on that row. If you have some follow-up or post, goes on that row. All that person's information goes on a row, okay? But importantly, the pre and the post. Try to get it into one sheet. The tool is going to require you to get it into one sheet. Okay. It's not helpful. Well, two things. It's not helpful to have the pre in one Excel sheet and a post in another. You got to combine them. And you need to combine them by that matching or that matching identification. Okay. So for those that are starting, make sure you have some ID. Well, Jim, I said it's going to be anonymous. That's fine. Make up some random 5-digit number and give it to them and say, when you log in, okay, or use your mother's birth date or something, okay, whatever it is, you need to match those folks. Okay. The other kind of setup is, hey, you know what? My pretest data, my pretest folks are very different than my post-test folks, very different than my follow-up folks. Again, all their information is going to be on one row, but it's very often the case that these folks are very different. Okay. Data cleaning wizard. This is this really came from guys and gals like you that said, how do you help with cleaning? So oftentimes you're using SurveyMonkey, okay, or Qualtrics, okay. So and you'll have question numbers. Sometimes there's the whole question in there. Sometimes the questions are below there, and so forth. Sometimes the liquor type items are just the labels in there. We have to fix all of that, okay? That has to be managed or fixed, okay? Put into numbers and average these four things, okay? Before we get moving with the test. So I'm going to show you how we do that. Quick plug for clinical significance. Again, the, the quantitative world, a lot of folks revolve around this statistical significance, particularly this 0.05 significance, which is basically, hey, you know what? If I can get a t-value of that magnitude from my t-test, less than 5 times out of 100 by chance, I'm going to say that's a statistically significant t-value, okay? And improbable to happen by chance, okay? But there's also this meaningfulness, okay? And again, I think for small samples, it's particularly relevant that you may not find a statistical significance, but the clinical significance is important. You'll have these slides, okay? The similarities between these things, okay? There's how do these things differ between them? This is about probability and p-values and how likely you ought to find that, okay? Clinical significance says, does it make a darn difference, okay, to people? Very briefly, statistical significance, but not clinical. Blood pressure medication is statistically significant, but it doesn't reduce cardiovascular events, okay? Clinically significant, but not statistically. Reduce falls by 30%, but doesn't reach clinical significance. Guess what? That's a big deal, right? I forget what the numbers are, but it's something in the order of 300,000 falls in hospitals annually, somewhere in there, 300, 700,000. And some 10% are really significant. Watch my language, are really important to reduce. And then sometimes both. Hey, readmissions are both down. Clinically, that's really statistically significant, and 30 and 25%. So you can have one or the other or both or neither, okay? But just to know that there's another way of slicing your results apple. Discussion draft, I'll get there. This is a new thing that we can now put your particular findings in context with respect to theoretical and practical implications, with respect to limitations, with respect to future research, with respect to summarizing what you have there. So this has got a lot of, this is a nice way to have a draft of your discussion draft, of your discussion chapter. Okay, so let's all get logged in. Okay, we'll get that going. You'll log in with this URL and then select the statistics. Okay. And let's get to some things here. So we'll give you a second to get logged in. For those that want to follow along, I will. I'll do another walkthrough with a demo data set with a example data set. But let me just demonstrate the data cleaning wizard, okay, and what can be done there. So to do that, I'm just going to upload an Excel file, and I'm going to select, it's my data cleaning wizard data set, the one I just showed you in Excel. Once that gets moving, it's going to go to next. So I want to get rid of the extra headers. All I want is some concise question, okay, name like Q1, Q2, okay, and get rid of everything else. So I want to get rid of that, okay, and then let's move along. Sometimes the numbers are too large. Excuse me, the names are too large because it was just entered in that way. So I'm going to apply that. So you can change those names there. Next, if there's misspellings, some reason, male has a capital M, a small m, disagrees, got 3 E's, 2 E's. So it's going to identify some of those misspelled variables. You can look at the before and after, merge those. And then very often there are Likert type items in there, like a knowledge scale. I happen to have a 5-point agreement scale. There's lots of options. You should know what kind of scale you have. That's my existing labels. I need to turn them into numbers to average them. So I'm going to select all 4 of those and turn those labels into those numbers. And very often there is a knowledge scale. Okay. All right. And let's just say I want to sum them. Click those items. Okay. If you have reverse code, you can flip the answers if you need to, but for the moment, we have a knowledge total. Okay. And then sure, have an ID, it's fine. Now you're really off to the races, okay? You should check your levels of measurement, like ID is just a label, okay? So numbers come in as scale, but that's truly just an ID variable. These are truly scale variables, 1 to 4, and then some open-ended question. I want to do one quick thing here. Well, and by the way, here's our total score. So this is important for those doing pre and post tests. You want to, conduct a total or average at pre-test and a total or average at post-test. And that's already done for you. And again, that moves you forward a lot. For those that have an open-ended, this is about transformational leadership. We have a text classification. And in that text classification, what I want to do is not do a whole thematic analysis, but let me just bucket those responses into some groups, okay? And you can see here, it's categorized them into community growth oriented service and awareness, vision, okay, principles, okay, visionary changes. So the good news is that not only do you get to describe that here, awesome, but you can now have that interact with your other variables. So that's kind of a cool thing. All right. For those that want to upload data or follow along, I just want to now pivot to an example data set, and we can go to master. There is a master data set here, or let's see here, master class somewhere right here. So master class, we can select that. And then we have that in there. So we have age group or some other demographics. Here I have movie and fruit and sleep and GPA pre to post, but it could be knowledge pre to post or any other kind of, there was some, infinite number of things here. So once the data is in there, you should look to make sure that those levels of measurement are correct, all right? As I say, the numbers will come in as scale, okay? Alphanumeric is going to come in as nominal, but hey, guess what? That is truly, age is truly an ordinal variable, so make it ordinal, okay? And it makes the tables pretty too. It doesn't take them out of order. So in data management, if you've not created a variable in the data cleaning wizard, you can do that here, variable calculator. For all of these data management tasks, there's a nice little handy dandy 3-minute video that you can look at right there. The other important thing is that once you create new variables, you want to download that managed data or those new variables under here. And there's other things you can do. And you can scroll over to see what those things are. Okay. But those are the two most common, I'd say, for DNPs. You can do different types of plots. I'll just exemplify one of them. GPA by age group. Okay. Video tutorials. Notice the icons. And you can see GPA pre and post by age group. You can change the labels of these things. Okay. You can export them in different ways. Okay. All right. The analysis, let me keep it to this audience. Really, you're going to be into a few things. You're going to be into descriptives, and you conduct descriptives by clicking on it, adding variables. Let's say I want all of these, except for fruit and movies. Let's keep this thing academic here. Okay, so it's also nice to see the crosstabs. So let's just exemplify that. Okay, video. For faculty, there's options sitting up here. Okay, there's defaults put in there, but just know that there's other options to be had. Add to the analysis. So here is our different variables, sleep, GPA, pre and post, okay, by age group, means and standard deviations, helpful scrollovers, APA table, and a write-up of what's in there. Typically, I don't like that write-up. My rule of thumb is put it in a table, put it in a text, but don't put it in both. So whatever that's worth. You'll be doing correlations, okay, between two variables. You can scroll over, and I can correlate these things. Notice the levels of measurement. For all these different test assumptions are built in. Pearson's got the assumption of linearity. You can see those plots and have a large data set here. And we give you a choice of APA tables, either in a triangle or here. This is probably optimal if you want to look at particular correlations. This one is optimal if, hey, I want to look at the relationship of everything, of each variable to each other. Here you can see that they're all related to each other. That asterisk indicates that it's significant at the 0.05 level. The results are in plain English. This was the big insight that everyone has to have assumptions for tests, and everyone has to interpret the tests, and everyone has to put things in APA. Let's just help with that. Okay, so if you use a test often, you want to kind of correct that alpha. The main part of this is the interpretation of this. Significant positive correlation, okay, between hours of sleep and GPA pre, 0.93, and the effect size, that's the importance level, and the p-value. The next is that once you have a result, what does that mean? I have a significant positive correlation. Well, this means as our sleep increases, GPA pre tends to increase. So for every one of these tests, assumptions, interpretation, APA tables. Okay, let's get to the t-test, which is what most folks are doing. You can scroll over, test mean differences between two scale variables. Yeah, that's what we're doing. And in my test, I want to see if there is a difference from my pre-test GPA to my post-test or post-GPA. So just to slow that down, I selected the test, I put in the variables, hit calculate. That's all we're doing here. As I mentioned, there is an assumption here, okay? That assumption of normality is tested with a test called Shapiro-Wilk test. The tool then runs the test, and the tool interprets the test. Guess what? When a Shapiro-Wilk test is significant, that's bad, and that means the assumption is violated. We could talk about that. That's part of the test. Here we can see the t-test was significant. That p-value is less than 0.05. Okay. This is one way to report that. Okay. DNPs typically don't use hypothesis. It's fine. And basically what we're saying is, hey, gosh, that GPA post is reliably higher than that GPA pre. And then a little a bar plot. Most DNPs, okay, my suggestion is you use the t-test and you run it, okay? You report the assumptions not met. And again, typically with these small sample sizes, they are not met, okay? Just report that, move on to the results of the t-test, we're done, okay? However, some folks might want to say, that assumption is violated, now what do I do? Well, the tool automatically enables a analogous test that's comparing pre to post GPA, but it is does it without the assumptions. It's called a Wilcoxon sign rank test. Okay, it's using medians, okay, instead of means, okay, and means everyone can get their brain around, okay. If I have a 1 to 5 scale, okay, 2.8 is close to the mid-range, 3.58 is moving towards the 5 range or the always, okay. Median's not so easy to understand, okay. 3.6 versus 2.73, okay. So that's why I recommend just using the paired t-test. Keep that when you download this, okay, keep that in your pocket in case someone asks about that normality violation, okay? You have that. Okay, discussion draft. Typically, actually, I want to go somewhere else with this. I want to go to part of my scrolling. Evidently, it's been a long time ago, or I passed it. Okay, so typically I had some, I'll go back. I had some data, simple data here around the match block burnout and some demographics. I conducted some analyses, descriptives, correlations among these things, independent sample t-test, okay, and a regression, okay. But importantly, what I did is I went to the discussion draft. And by the way, so all of that needs to be downloaded here, okay? Or up here is another way of doing that. But I also ran a discussion draft section. So when you generate a discussion draft, again, this is most helpful for validated instruments. And it does take a minute. You want to put in the name of your discussion draft, add your research questions or PICO questions or study aims. Then you want to clarify what these acronyms are. It's not just a pretest, it's a pretest about blah, blah, blah from author, whatever. So you'll want to state that here, okay? All right. And then after you do that, okay, so then it will, that was fun, not gun. Okay. After you do that, ask you to confirm that. Okay. What do you get? Well, what you get is this. You get a discussion draft with an introduction, again, this was around the Matchlock burnout. You get a summary of all of your findings together. That's a very cool thing. And interpretation thereof. You also, so it's looking at everything, and it's looking at your demographics. Then you get to the theoretical implications of your findings, practical implications, limitations, future research, okay, and reference and conclusion. So, two very important caveats here. One is this is AI written, so you have to edit everything. A. B, 5 to 10% of these things, the DOI is going to be wrong or whatever. So you got to validate all of these with Google Scholar. Melissa, we probably need an app for that. So, or tied into their lit review. Okay, so but you want to vet those. All right. So I think I've covered lots of things. Let me also just we'll get to the Q&A. So start generating your questions if you have any at all. And I do want to talk about sample size for a second. And I'm going to get to that. So just to say that I offer free 15-minute consults. You can use that QR code. As I mentioned earlier, Samantha can assist students. Ashley for faculties, department trials or demos. Melissa for talks for me. Our phone number, our website addresses. So just to give you some of that. I did want to go back to two things here. So one is the decision tree. This will be tuned up with AI, but at the moment, I want to predict an outcome that's scale. I'm doing a linear regression. So these kinds of things you can play with this, you can't break it. So, look for around differences or predictions or relationships. The other important point is that once you do select your analysis, like a paired t-test, you want to know the sample size. So it's called a power analysis. And just go to the paired samples t-test, and you can kind of see for a medium effect size what that sample size is, okay? And I know I've helped folks with sample sizes of 5. Yes, you can do analysis with 5, but the desired would be 34, 15 to 34. Okay, so let's get to some of these questions here. If I can make this thing bigger here. All right. All righty. Okay, so question, is there concerns about implementation and the inability to collect post-test data? What statistical tests can be done, if any? I have a Likert administered to RN, sample size of 20. Okay, so, well, look, inability to collect post-test data, you have what you have, okay? Your committee will agree with that or not, all right? If you don't have post-test, then you're doing a basic, kind of descriptive study, or you can relate variables at the pretest, but you have what you have. I mean, you can't, there's only so much you can do. Other questions, particularly faculty. I'm curious about your thoughts of this. There was a faculty member that came across. Does anybody have a project here that we can work on? Let me just refresh this. That would be fun.
And if you shared your project, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll unmute you.
Aha, okay, Iowa. All right, Ellie.
Unfortunately, I think Ellie had to leave early.
Well, okay. So, okay, this is Ellie, I would say this to you, even if you were here, and you'll get the recording. Slightly messy data. So we want to manage that, okay? And maybe it is just like this. So I don't know, well, you have pre and post. And if pre Q1, so we want to manage that. So this is a great place to have ID variables. Um, you know, is this person? Yeah, we'd want to kind of drill into this a bit. This seems like different kind of data entirely than this kind of data. It's okay to run two projects, infinite number of projects. So maybe you are comparing pre to post. Okay. Um, so if these are the same folks, same row, these are different folks, put in a time variable, pre and post. Okay. And then maybe look at this separately. So, all right. Other questions? Sorry about that, Ellie. Feel free to use that QR code. Do you have a chance to get the recording? Yes, that's answered. Other questions? Don't be shy.
You're also welcome to raise your hand. We'll unmute you if you'd rather ask it live.
And it, right. So I'm not under the illusion that I've answered everything exactly so that you got it. But feel free to watch the video. Feel free to, get demos and trials. Just give it another second. And I will put this back on. Okay. QR code for me, Samantha, Ashley, Melissa's email, contact information, and some websites. What menu options on the left are essential and which are nice to know? So, well, the menu options, the uh, it's like cooking. What utensils do I need? Different dishes, different utensils. But certainly at the uploading data level, you can paste in an Excel file here, flat file, or upload a data file here. So those are two things that you want to have. As I say in the data management, most people have Likert type items. So the calculator and exporting of that. Most people want a plot of some sort. Personally, it's hard to beat Microsoft Word's plots. Okay. Um, you know, we're a small team. They put in, $100 million. So their plots are really great. But to have one integrated here, I mean, you can do things. We found a significant correlation between hours of sleep and GPA. Okay. So you can see this kind of trend. All right. So those plots as you need them. Okay. And then analysis, again, for folks on this call, typically the descriptives, pair t-tests, and pub maybe correlate, chi-squares rather. And then downloading button, important, and discussion draft, important. Do you offer help with a student? Yes, please use the QR code, Lori. Okay. I think that is it. Thank you all for joining. My request of you all is to share the recording, share the webinars. Know that there is a lit review to help with lit review. I know most of you folks are down the road, but for the cohort before you, share that there's a qualitative webinar coming on. And for faculty, know that there's different courseware to be had for the quant tool. Oops, sorry. Let me see if I can get that. So this courseware with different lessons in there as well. So thank you all very much. Janine, Mary, thank you. Alyssa, Mary, Janine. So thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time at the next webinar. Yeah, thanks so much. Have a good weekend. Stay safe. Bye all.